Firelight Radio, don't touch the dial, 'cause here we go. You're just in time for the show at Firelight Radio. Welcome to Firelight Radio, where we tune into the nature folk movement. It's good to have you at the campfire, and boy do we have a nice program for you today. We have Bobby Angel in the studio. You know, it's not really a studio, we're around the campfire here, but we like to call it a studio because we are broadcasting this out to you. And let me tell you about Bobby Angel. He doesn't have maybe the best singing voice in the world, and he really doesn't have much in the way of an ability to pick from a guitar, but he can strum, and he has some good songs with a good nature folk message. And today he's going to be talking about protecting the trees. So without further ado, let's go to the show. Singer-songwriter Bobby Angel strums, no finger picking and there are no drums, but he always has an interview when the song is done. Bobby Angel. Said that it looked obscene, that it had all the wrong types of trees. Other people didn't notice it at all. The road ahead was all they saw. Rumor had it had a hobo camper 3. Not exactly the safest place to be. But if you listen closely, you could hear the bird call. It was the ugliest forest you ever saw. It had a 2-track that went to a foundation that somebody said used to be a service station. Long ago, the owners up and left, and so grew back a secondary forest. Still some trees from the old orange grove that in the light shine like gold. Over time it grew thick and tall. It was the ugliest forest you ever saw. Bears seemed to like it, at least one. He'd go and play underneath the sun. And birds like to land on the branch and eat the berries. They didn't care if it was the wrong plant. Lots of mice and rabbits and such, they liked the forest very much. A no trespass sign protected it by law. It was the ugliest forest you ever saw. Then came the stakes and the neon tape that more or less sealed its fate. A week later, the machines revved up and didn't stop until everything was cut. Birds are gone, except for some crows, and a dead bear by the side of the road. It was about the ugliest forest you ever saw, but not anymore, 'cause it's completely gone. But not anymore, because it's completely gone. Ugliest Forest. I wrote it the exact same time I wrote Hobo Camp. They're kind of companion pieces. Maybe told at different perspectives. But we see that all the time, is these little patches of woods on the side of the road, and you just you take them for granted, like, oh, it's a little patch of woods, it's kind of nice to drive by, usually not walking through them, but maybe there's people that walk through them, or they look at them all the time, and then one day, and the reason it's the ugliest forest is because, it's kind of the orphan forest. It might be a secondary growth forest. It might be just full of the wrong type of plants. If you're down in South Florida, melaleuca or Brazilian pepper, it's just, an ugly forest. And if it were in a national park, well, they get to work quick on trying to get rid of the exotics and controlling them and just getting native flora back there. But because it's this piece of fallow, real estate on the edge of town, or kind of in the outskirts or middle, or somewhere in town, it just kind of sits there and it's feral. But birds and bears enjoy it depending on how big it is. So it serves an ecological and scenic and societal function. Yeah, and then one day, the stakes show up and the big machines and the sign, the notice with this is parcels being developed. And next thing you know, the ugliest forest that you ever saw is gone. And it gets torn down, and, a shopping center goes in and a parking lot. And we've seen it too many times, and it's like, oh, this big glitzy shopping center, and then 5 years later it's vacant signs in the shopping center, and they're building, or 10 years later, they're building a new shopping center next to it. And sometimes you just wonder, what the hell are we doing? So Ugliest Forest, yeah, it tries to speak for the trees that don't have that protection, at a state or national or local level, and that are just at the whimsy of some developer going in and cutting it all down and putting up a shopping center. And maybe that's in the big scheme of things. I mean, I'm not here to vilify anyone, but we don't know what we miss with those little patches of woods until they're gone. And then you're like, oh God, I miss that. And the bears and the birds and the raccoons and anything else, the bobcats in there, they miss it too. Where do they go? They have to run off to another stretch of wilderness, or, they get displaced. They're like hobos, all of a sudden they're wanderers. They have to find a new patch. So that's what the song's about. And it's, again, kind of a companion piece to Hobo Camp. Singer-songwriter Bobby Angel strums, no finger picking, and there are no drums, but he always has an interview when the song is done. Bobby Angel. Well, there you have it, folks, and thank you, Bobby Angel. That is a thought-provoking message, and I love the interview. So often people will record a song and they won't tell anybody what it's about, and they say, well, why don't you figure it out, the listener? Sometimes it's nice to hear the backstory, and this backstory just adds a layer to the song, and it makes me think, what do we do to go out there and protect the trees? And it makes me want to go out and look at every tree in my backyard and in my neighborhood and just say a little thank you to that tree for being there, and maybe go up and not necessarily give it a hug. People might think that's strange, but maybe shake its hand. So thank you for tuning in to this edition of Firelight Radio, where we tune into the nature folk movement. It's been really good having you by the campfire. I'm just going to sit here a little bit and listen to it crackle.